Hi, this is Dr. Christopher Perrin, and welcome to this episode of The Christopher Perrin Show. This podcast is about teachers and friends and books. In fact, I bet you have a favorite book that has become a very good friend. Hopefully, you've also found a book that's so good that you've decided to try another book by that same author, then perhaps another, and then even another. And after reading 4 or 5 books by the same author, it's not unusual to begin to feel as if the author is present to you, a voice who speaks to you at times, something like a friend. Many have had this experience with the great writer C.S. Lewis. At least many of my friends have, and so have I. Many first came to appreciate him as a child, reading through his books, The Chronicles of Narnia, when Lewis became a kind of childhood friend to many of us. But Lewis is not just a writer of children's books. He's famous as a great essay writer, fiction writer, a writer of Christian apologetics. Is C.S. Lewis your friend, or someone like C.S. Lewis a friend? If not Lewis, what author would you note that is always or frequently with you in conversation and thought? For me, I would also note Augustine and Chesterton. I've hung around these friends for decades, and we continue to get together, as it were. These are some of my oldest friends. I'm pretty close as well to Joseph Pieper, too, and have known him for a while. He often talks to me and won't stop. About 7 years ago, I was introduced to Marilynne Robinson, the contemporary writer who differs from Augustine and Chesterton and Pieper in one striking way, and that is that she's still walking the earth. She's remarkable. I recommend her book, her trilogy, Gilead, Home, and Lila. The fourth one, Jack, not as great, but those first 3 are remarkable. The maxim, Optimus magister bonus liber est, is in Latin a parallelism that reads in the Latin word order this way: the best teacher a good book is. That's Optimus magister bonus liber est. The best teacher a good book is, or the best teacher is a good book. There's a corollary maxim in Latin that runs this way: bonus liber amicus optimus, or a good book is the best friend. Both maxims are complementary. A good book is both a friend and a teacher. I, like many, can cite Lewis as a friend. After all, he loved Chesterton. In fact, Lewis said regarding Chesterton that someone should never be too careful in what he reads, because he read Chesterton maybe carelessly, and it led him to the Christian faith, even as it were kind of against his will. But he read Chesterton, loved Chesterton. Lewis also loved George MacDonald. But anyway, Lewis knew the value of reading good books, good old books. He wrote an essay on this topic. The essay was on the reading of old books. It was an introduction to another old book by Athanasius's book On the Incarnation, written around 318 A.D. Here Lewis, better than anyone else, I think, tells us why we should read old books, good old books. Here's how he puts it, and it's worth hearing him for about a paragraph. There is a strange idea abroad that in every subject the ancient books should be read only by the professionals, and that the amateur should content himself with the modern books. Thus I have found as a tutor in English literature that if the average student wants to find out something about Platonism, the very last thing he thinks of doing is to take a translation of Plato off the library shelf and read the Symposium. He would rather read some dreary modern book 10 times as long, all about isms and influences, and only once in 12 pages telling him what Plato actually said. The error is rather an amiable one, for it springs from humility. The student is half afraid to meet one of the greatest philosophers face to face. He feels himself inadequate and thinks he will not understand him. But if he only knew the great man, just because of his greatness, is more intelligible than his modern commentator. The simplest student will be able to understand, if not all, yet a very great deal of what Plato said, but hardly anyone can understand some modern books on Platonism. It has always therefore been one of my main endeavors as a teacher to persuade the young that first-hand knowledge is not only more worth acquiring than second-hand knowledge, but is usually much easier and more delightful to acquire. That's Lewis. And note that Lewis himself calls himself a tutor. A tutor, in Latin, a tutor can mean a guardian, and the adjective tutus means safe, secure. A tutor is one who is to ensure that someone walks a safe and good and healthy path. This is part of the Oxford tradition, and it's also present at St. John's College, where I attended. A tutor, the professors there are called tutors. A tutor often teaches privately, that's one way we use the word, and often has the responsibility of guardianship, guidance, and protection. At St. John's College, a writer like Plato, a great writer like Plato, is regarded as the teacher in the classroom. The tutor's role is to guide students before the great teacher in a text like Plato's Symposium. Thus, when we who are teachers exercise this responsibility, it's our honor to introduce students to Plato directly, knowing from our previous encounter with Plato that he is a great author, greater than all of his commentators. We know that the delight we had reading Plato can become their delight. We prefer that they hear directly from Plato rather than from us describing Plato. We prefer that they go straightway ad fontem, to the source, to the fountain. Thus, even a great teacher and writer like Lewis knows that it is often best for him to be a tutor and let Plato be the teacher. Even the teacher, therefore, knows that sometimes the best teacher is a good book that he brings before his students. The good teacher is happy to place Plato before his students, saying of Plato, he must increase and I must decrease. Not only will Plato instruct and inform, but he will inspire. To read one dialogue of Plato is well to read, inevitably, a second one. Soon Plato becomes not only a delight, but a friend. And if the friendship deepens, Plato will start to influence you in subtle ways like our incarnated friends do. Just as the habits, sensibilities, and preferences of our friends often gradually become our own, so can Plato's ideas and ways of thinking and seeing the world become ours. We find ourselves becoming more inquisitive, asking questions about assumptions, and musing on the nature of things like justice, a good life, happiness, and virtue, just as Plato does. And we enjoy returning to him just as we enjoy cavorting with our friends. The bookish evidence of this is the well-worn, marked-up book with the unraveling binding and dog-eared pages. Do you have some books like that? The good teacher will not only introduce the Optimus Magister, the best teacher, but help cultivate the friendship. For yes, a teacher can be a friend of a particular and particularly valuable kind. The book becomes a friend, the author becomes a friend, the teacher introducing the author in the book becomes a friend. All three, the student, the author, the teacher, become friends together. Augustine himself says so, noting the remarkable sympathy and fellowship that the teacher and student enjoy. A good teacher will arrange for lots of unhurried time for encounter, engagement, and conversation in various settings. We all know the value of a good book placed in our hands at the right time. We give and receive books as gifts. We likely all can remember a particularly meaningful book that helped and possibly changed us, and somebody placed it in our hands. Perhaps you still have books you grew up with and treasured. Maybe you read through all of the Chronicles of Narnia and the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and maybe you did so several times. Perhaps characters like Peter or Lucy or Bilbo or Aragorn remain dear to you. If so, the names of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien may have a kind of magical quality to them, for the characters have become your friends, and you owe them a great debt of gratitude for introducing these characters to you, and yes, even for creating them. Some have grown up in the imagined worlds of Narnia or Middle-earth or similar imagined worlds from the likes of Lewis Carroll, A.A. Milne, and Beatrix Potter. Great books, even great children's books, may have shaped you deeply, even helping you to form your moral universe and understanding. One chemistry professor that I know grew up outside of any church tradition, but found his moral life shaped by the Lord of the Rings trilogy by Tolkien, which he read and reread. When tempted to join various dubious activities, he found himself saying, "No, Aragorn would never do that." What a great friend is Aragorn, but the better friend is Tolkien, who made the introduction in the first place. Well, thank you for watching or listening to this podcast. You can find my writing at christopherperrin.substack.com, where a lot of these same themes are present in the form of written articles, and you can also view a number of my video lectures and other kinds of teaching at classicalu.com. Thanks once again for your kind attention. I really appreciate it. I'd like to thank you for watching or listening to the Christopher Perrin Show. And to do that, I can give you a coupon code that will give you 10% off on anything that you might care to order at classicalacademicpress.com. And the coupon code is simply CP Show. Thanks again for listening or watching.